morning, Year 11, and welcome today to your America screencast for Opportunity and Inequality 1920 to 1972. This is going to link to LO26 of your knowledge organizer. What did World War II bring? How did World War II bring America out of the Great Depression? And I have added a little bit onto this. So how did World War II change the lives of African Americans and women? So we're looking at World War II here. Now, what's important here, especially for this added bit, is the fact that this also links with your later knowledge organizer and screencasts on African American civil rights and on women. But I wanted to do it chronologically. I wanted to add it into here if we're looking at the Second World War as well. So let's start off by looking at World War II and how it impacted the Great Depression. So we can see on the screen that by 1939, unemployment in America is still really, really high. But we can see that we know that World War II starts here. So World War II starts in 1939 and it ends in 1945. And we can see by the graph that unemployment drops massively. Now, it wasn't doing that during 1933 to 1939 when the New Deal was happening. It dropped massively during the Second World War. So suggesting really it was the Second World War that brought America out of the Great Depression. So war begins in 1939, but America stay neutral. So they do not necessarily have a part to play in the war in terms of fighting. But what they do is they do start to sell things. So they come up with something called the cash and carry plan. That's where the USA sold Britain and France weapons. So we can see this here, USA aid to Britain. There's going to be weapons in there. And this had a massive positive impact. It gave money for factories in America to create these weapons. And obviously the scale of the war was huge, so it massively increased employment as well. Also the idea of transport as well, transporting those weapons, increasing employment. We then have the Lend-Lease Agreement, where the USA loaned Britain $700 million worth of weapons. So we can see that here, going over to give it to them. Now, even though Britain weren't necessarily paying for this straight away, it still meant that factories were working. It still meant that they needed more people, bringing in money into the economy, which is really, really important. Because it means businesses are doing well in terms of factories. It means there's more employment. It means there's more money in people's pockets, finally. And we can see that because that happens between 1939 and 1941. So we're at this point here. So because of Lend-Lease, because of the cash and carry plan, unemployment drops to 10%. So it's really, really, really positive. And then there's something that happens that means America gets dragged into the war. So Hawaii is bombed. So Pearl Harbor, an American war base, naval base, is bombed by Japan. Japan are on the side of Nazi Germany, so America enter the war and join on Britain and France's side. As a result of this, Roosevelt creates a new alphabet agency called the WPB, the War Production Board. What this does is it basically goes into factories. It says you're no longer, for example, going to make, I don't know, Ford cars. You're no longer going to make radios. You are going to make things for the war. You are going to make armored vehicles for the war. You are going to make bullets for the war. You're going to make bombs for the war. And we need you to do that. And because America joined the war, now everyone in America is basically joining into the war effort. So you've got soldiers going in, men going to war, meaning there's loads more jobs in factories that need to be filled. So pretty much, we've got lots of people entering the factories to work. Again, meaning employment is high, business is doing well, so the war business is doing well. There's more money in people's pockets. There's 4 million people employed by the armed forces, lower unemployment. We've got farmers and the coal industry is beginning to boom because people, they need food for the war. So, all sides of American society are really beginning to get behind the war effort, and that means that employment is high and more money in people's pockets. And we can really see this by the end of the Second World War in 1945. Unemployment is at its lowest since the Great Depression began. Because in 1939 there was 9.5 million unemployed. By 1944 there was 670,000 unemployed. Now 670,000 is a lot in terms of a numerical figure when you think about it. However, when you consider that America is made up of 100 million people and the fact that they've gone from 9.5 million to 670,000 unemployed in just 5 years because of the Second World War, it's a massive, massive improvement. This basically ends the Great Depression. The Great Depression is no more after the Second World War. It basically solves the problem of businesses doing poorly, unemployment being high, and there's no money. It's the complete opposite. But it wasn't just the economy that was, changed by the Second World War for the better. Really, it was the lives of African Americans and women. So if we use the life of this man as an example, so this man is a chef, and he's a chef on an American naval ship. So at first, African American sailors, they had to work in the kitchens. They weren't allowed to be part of the Navy and fight for the Navy. It's very similar in terms of the Air Force. The Air Force wouldn't train black pilots, and black soldiers were not allowed to train as officers. However, as the war progressed, they realised they needed all the soldiers they could get. So what they did was the Air Force trained black pilots. So we can see these here. And the armed forces, they also trained black officers to fight during the Second World War as well, previously not being allowed. So massive, massive changes, finally serving their country in a meaningful way and able to prove themselves as well. However, what you will notice is that there is kind of no black soldiers who would be in charge of white officers, whereas white officers would be able to be in charge of black officers. So that's something to be aware of, that there is still segregation, there is still racism, there is still a racial hierarchy. So it's not changed everything for the good. And black nurses as well. So black nurses were only able to treat African Americans. So African American nurses only able to treat African Americans. They weren't allowed to help white Americans, which I think is a little bit crazy. If you're on your deathbed, you just want help, don't you? But again, showing segregation, showing that even though they're helping America, they still kind of think, these African Americans, they're a bit different, they're diseased, I don't want them touching me. Showing that the mindset is still entrenched in racism. Furthermore, in terms of women then, so we just looked at some African American nurses, but women played a massive part in the Second World War as well, and that was because women had occupied 1/3 of all jobs in America during the war. And we can see this here, the stereotype of the woman is kind of gone. Okay, she's got her hair tied up, she's getting her muscles out, she's putting in a shift, she's putting in the effort to help the American people. And also 350,000 women had joined the women's section of the armed forces. So women were really playing their part in America. They were proving themselves to be just as capable as men, in all these sorts of jobs. Now, as a result of this change between for African Americans and women, the fact that they are all now fighting for their country, they are serving their country, they are part of America, and they are proving their worth to men, women proving their worth to men, African Americans proving their worth to white people. And as a result of this, when the Second World War ended, we can see a world map here, and when the Second World War ended, the women and the African Americans, more so the African American soldiers who had fought in Europe, but they said, well, we've brought liberty to Italy, we've brought liberty to France, we've brought liberty to Germany, we've brought freedom to Europe. And then they go back to the United States and are supposed to be having liberty because that's what they fought for in Europe. And African Americans, they don't have liberty there. They don't have freedom because they're segregated. They're separate but equal when we really know they're unequal. Women who made sure those factories worked so Europe could be freed. They didn't have full liberty. They didn't have equal pay. They didn't have equal treatment under law. And what this did was they said, well, if we fought for liberty in Europe and we've got it, we are going to fight for liberty in the United States of America and we are going to get it. And that is the birth, really, of the civil rights movement in America and the feminist movement. It is inspired by their work during the Second World War.